All right, guys, we are going to finish our conversation with Brian Lincer from InternicolaLaw Firm. We've been talking about the FDD, that franchise disclosure document, 23 items. I call it attorneys talking to attorneys. It's laid out, the same for everybody. It's the same outline. And so we're going to discuss the very end of that today, item 20, 21, 22, and 23. So Brian, what's in item 20? What are we looking for?
So I think the item 20 is really insightful in many ways. The way I look at item 20 is almost as the way a doctor would look at a blood test, right? We're kind of looking. It's the outlets, list of outlets. So that would be how many outlets opened in the last 3 years. So it's required to go 3 years back. How many opened, how many closed, how many terminations there were, how many ceased operations for other reasons. How many renewals, non-renewals, things like that. So it basically is a graph with all numbers, a chart with all numbers in it. But the way you interpret the numbers, there's kind of something behind the scenes that could be, viewed from that information. Obviously, things that worry me sometimes is, a drastic amount of closures, right? If they're, and there has to be, again, we have to find out the reason why, there were those closures, and sometimes it's a valid reason. And, I'm sure with the pandemic, we're going to see, closures, and it can be a lot of times explained away, but a lot of, I want to, I think it's important to have that information and ask that question to the franchisor, what happened here? If there's some sort of anomaly, or if it's over a certain percentage. Obviously there's going to be some closures most of the time, and terminations, and
especially with a bigger brand. I remember working with a brand one time, and gosh, this was years ago, but I think there were 10 or 15 closures, and they said we had to clean house. Like, the brand was going in the wrong direction. We all need to make amends, and it was a matter, like, it was some mutual, some not, but I think asking the question and getting a very transparent answer was actually great. I think one of the things, when I refer someone to you and you're kind of going through, they've retained you, you're going through that. So when you break down helping them with the FDD, do you tell them the questions to ask around each item? So for item 20, do you kind of give them some insight there as far as, here's what I'm looking at, and this is why I have a question on it?
Yeah. It kind of depends what we find. If it's, typical and there's a couple of closures, we kind of just say, that's normal. It's within a normal range. So we don't really pay attention to it, but we always explain it, go through it. Sometimes it could be, if there's 200 locations that in 1 year when it's typically 20. That also could be a problem, because we have to make sure that they can manage that type of growth. Right. So it's a conversation. So it could, that could be a great thing for the brand, and it could be all great things, but we want to make sure that we have that they're able to absorb that. So they have to, increase the management, capacity and things like that. So, it really depends on what we see, and then we have the conversation about it. And really, what I want to focus in on is really, ask that next question if there is something there. It's not.
You'll give them some of the questions to ask based on what because you see this so often. Yeah.
So it really depends. What it could be a high percentage of non-renewals, like not closures necessarily, but why aren't people renewing? And maybe it's and that's that. In my mind, there's never too much information. You can disregard that information. It may be nothing. It may just be an anomaly, but ask the question. It can never hurt.
Okay. How about 21? What's in that?
21. So those are the financials. So that's something
of the corporate office.
Well, it's going to be of the franchisor, the franchise franchising entity.
Okay.
Now that could be
not necessarily corporate-owned stores.
Correct. Right. Okay. the affiliates and the corporate locations, if they're owned by the corporate locations, if they have corporate locations, that's not going to be part of it.
Okay.
It's only going to be the franchising entity. So if it's big restaurants franchising LLC, if that's the franchisor, that's going to be what the financials that are going to be included there.
Do you go through that with them, or is that something I would refer to a CPA to go through that part?
We go through it, generally speaking.
Okay.
From our perspective, what I look for there is really if it's a brand new brand, they're not going to have too much of it. The financials aren't going to look too pretty. Now that doesn't mean that there's not financial backing behind it. As representing the franchisor, a lot of times we'll just say, you know what, make a deposit into this we'll create a new entity, and they'll make an initial deposit in there. So it could be $10,000 in their financials.
Okay.
But I know they're backed in other ways, so it doesn't always tell a clear picture of what what their financials look like and what their backing is.
Okay.
For me, as a looking into the brand, and I'm looking more of it from a liability perspective. I want to make sure that the franchisor is not judgment proof to a certain degree.
Oh.
Meaning that I don't want them to be out of business tomorrow. So I'm looking for things like that, kind of bigger picture kind of things. Whereas a CPA may be able to get into it a little more detail, and can kind of see through it, see through the big picture.
Become a little bit more important with your bigger brands than that 21. I mean, not that there's anything more or less important, but I would think that the more locations that are open, the more kind of relevant that item 21 becomes.
Yeah, I think, and I think it depends. On as you go with a bigger brand, there's positives and negatives to going with a bigger brand. The positives going to be they have more financial backing. It's going to be a more robust financials, much less likely to fold or go out. Whereas a newer emerging brand, their financials aren't going to look as good. You generally have more opportunity, bigger territories, and can kind of take advantage of a lot of upside to negate the potential downside. So it's a little riskier in that from a legal perspective in certain circumstances. So that's really what we're looking for there. But for the most part, it's more of in my mind, like how sometimes even the bigger brands fail. So to me, it's how do franchise systems respond, and how are they growing and improving? To me, that's more important than the actual numbers, because you don't want to you don't want to get sometimes even the bigger companies get too static, right? So I want to see like evolution, and that comes a lot from the franchisees, and see how they can pivot and do things like that. So I think they're important to look at, but probably not the most important thing, not the most important indication of what the franchisor is going to do. Okay,
thank you. How about 22? What's in that?
So the FDD has a bunch of other contracts within the FDD. So you have the franchise agreement, you have the personal guarantees, you have the ACH forms, you have a lease rider. So basically, it gives you a list of all of the other agreements that are in the FDD.
Okay.
So and those
the example of the franchise agreement they're going to sign should be there.
Correct. Okay. So, and that's even on there'll be a release, right? So in the event that you part ways, it's the release that that the party's going to be signing is already pre-negotiated.
Okay.
So everything's pre-done. So you get to look at it and gives you more information, and that's that's what you're going to be subject to, and so is the franchisor. Here's the agreement, all the agreements between the parties, so you have it laid out in front of you before you make that decision.
And then that last item, that item 23, which is the receipt page. Some of my clients, usually my clients are pretty well educated by the time they get to that point, but some people are always scared to sign anything. So what's the receipt page, and are there any obligations, and why is it there?
So the receipt page, so in the franchise industry, there are many time requirements by law. All right. For example, you can't sign a franchise agreement within 14 days of your receipt of the FDD. And, things. So really what the receipt page is just a franchisee's acknowledgement that they received the FDD. And that gives the franchisor the ability to set out the appropriate time schedule. But if there's zero obligation, it's basically, if you signing a FedEx package, you sign the FedEx package, just acknowledging that you received it. And that's basically all it is. So there's no fear. You can sign it as long as there's nothing else, no agreement as part of that. The receipt page by itself is just you're acknowledging receipt of the FDD on that date, on that specific date.
Awesome. Thank you. I know this was a long one, but I appreciate all your time.
Anytime, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.